or at least they wiped out huge numbers, entire families of species. And this was sort of politically incorrect. His thesis was that this resulted because these animals had not evolved in the presence of humans in these new lands, in these places, in Australia. So divergent evolution in places like the Americas and Australia took place in the absence of humans. Those tree sloths and mastodons had no experience, directly or via their ancestors, with humans, whereas in Africa and Asia they did. So over the course, looking back here at these maps, we're talking about between, say, here, actually going much further back, if you think about the ancestors of humans, the hominid ancestors of humans, there were mammals all over the place, but there were only hominids in these restricted areas. And as evolution proceeded down through the years, between here and here, humans arrived for the first time in the Americas and Australia. And these giant tree sloths and 5,000-pound bison look at these, probably 4 or 5 foot tall humans weighing, maybe what, 120 pounds? And if you're a 1,200-pound tree sloth hanging out in a tree and you see a 4.5 foot tall human walk up, what's your reaction? It's the same reaction giant tree sloths probably had everything, which was giant tree sloths we call them sloths for a reason. They didn't move very much. They were really slow. If you're a mastodon and you weigh, who knows, 8, 10,000 pounds, and a 120-pound human walks up, maybe even like 10 of them walks up, what's your reaction? Yeah. I mean, whatever you react, however you feel like, right? Basically, it's entirely up to you. They had no fear. They had no reason to fear. They had no experience with humans as predators. They had, in some cases, no experience of predators of any kind, right? These giant lions probably didn't have much to fear from much of anything, or these 5,000-pound bison, that kind of thing. So they were probably very easy prey for humans with tools, with spears, humans acting together, hunting as a team, that kind of thing. And part of what spurred Paul Martin's hypothesis was, in fact, the discovery of fossil remains of a mastodon in southeastern Arizona with a spear point wedged between its ribs. Unmistakable evidence of hunting by humans. Now, he put these together not just for the Americas, but for a lot of other parts of the world, and over and over and over and over again, you see the same pattern. This wave of extinctions of large mammals and birds in the immediate wake of the arrival of humans as best we can date it. Now, there may have been other factors as well as hunting. Hunting is why we call it overkill, but it's also possible that diseases contributed. It's also possible that there were other things going on, such as the end of the Ice Age, that may also have made conditions worse for these animals. But you have to remember, any kind of environmental change related to glacial and interglacial cycles would have been something that those animals had already been through many, many, many times before, evolutionarily speaking, right? Whether it's warming climate, decreasing precipitation, the disappearance of ice, changing patterns of vegetation, you name it, all those things had happened over and over and over and over and over again throughout the Pleistocene. And somehow those large mammals and birds had survived, had persisted anyway. So the arrival of humans looks like the most plausible explanation for the demise of these species. And Paul Martin's hypothesis, which was laughed out of the room in 1965, is now actually widely accepted as the best explanation we've got for these patterns. And this is what Crosby, and Jared Diamond for that matter, build on in constructing their argument about the portmanteau biota and the Neo-Eurus. And I want to talk about why. So because large extinctions did not occur at the same time on different continents nor with the same intensity, climate change alone seems to be an unlikely cause of such largely time-transgressive extinctions. I'm borrowing this from Geography 148. I just basically said that. Extinctions of Australian megafauna occurred 15 to 30,000 years ago, with 86.4% of the megafauna going extinct. The large-bodied mammal extinctions occurred between 10 and 12,000 years ago in North and South America, 73.3 and 79.6% respectively of megafauna becoming extinct. Africa, on the other hand, which is the site of human evolution and dispersal, experienced a 14.3% extinction of megafauna within the last 100,000 years. This sequence of extinction follows the spread of people from Africa into Australia, Eurasia, and North and South America. Paul Martin, Quaternary Extinctions, 1984. Crosby characterizes the earliest humans as shock troops for the Neo-Europeans. Now, this is perhaps the piece that we haven't gotten to yet. Why would that be the case? How could you make that kind of argument? What's the relationship between the earliest arrival of humans and then the subsequent arrival of the Neo-Europeans many thousands of years later? What difference could it possibly have made? This is a graph from another Paul Martin article giving you a sense of, as best we can reconstruct it, how long ago humans arrived at different parts of the Americas, and it's keyed to the local extinction of fauna in different parts of the Americas. There's still actually quite a bit of debate about exactly how long it took humans to get from the Bering Land Bridge to the tip of South America. The ongoing efforts to find sites down here that might be significantly older and cast doubt on this notion that they sort of expanded southward. But they did expand, as best we can understand it, very, very quickly, or it seemed very quickly anyway, right? 11,500 years ago, they're up in northern Canada, and in 1,000 years, they make it to the southern tip of South America. I think Jared Diamond actually he's like, well, does that sound fast to you? And he's like, well, if you actually work it out, that means they had to move like 100 yards a day, or something like that. It's not that remarkably fast. It just looks fast over those kinds of timescales. Here are some of the animals we're talking about. Outside of Macone, you can see the Smilodon, right? The saber-toothed cat. That's one of these megafauna that went extinct. Mammoths, mastodons, lions. All right. Now, I haven't quite put the last piece in place for you. And that is simply this. Why shock troops for the Neo-Europeans? The argument is that by wiping out large percentage, right, 70, 80, 85% of the large mammals, the large fauna of places like the Americas, well, in the old world, they persisted. This essentially deprived the descendants of those early arriving humans of the animal species, the raw material, so to speak, from which domesticated livestock could emerge later. Right? So in Europe and Asia and Africa, there were the ancestors of sheep, goats, cattle, horses, camels, the livestock that humans there domesticated and which they used to, for instance, increase their food production. In the Americas and Australia and other places, the overkill that followed on the heels of the first arrival of humans wiped out the large animals that the peoples there might then later subsequently have been able to domesticate and use for things like food production. So that's how this piece fits in. And I mentioned last time, Crosby stresses livestock is the key distinction. If there's any single distinction, substantive important difference between what happened in Europe and Asia, or in southwestern Asia, and what happened in the New World, it has to do with livestock. And we haven't talked about all those implications yet, but this is why the Pleistocene overkill hypothesis is such an important part of things. Okay? Any questions? Yeah?
Why would big animals have prevented livestock and domestication from happening?
It's not that big animals would have prevented livestock and domestication. It's quite the opposite. It's that the large animals, granted, well, I mean, elephants are a partially domesticated species in parts of Asia, right? I don't think it's fair to say they're fully domesticated, but that's one example. That's a direct example. These don't look like the kinds of animals that would evolve into cows, do they? And you're right, they're not. Nonetheless, the point is that if you look at all of the percentage of species of animals that have been domesticated as against the whole realm of animal species is really small, right? And there are a variety of traits that you need to have in an animal, behavioral traits, reproductive traits, that kind of thing, that they all need to sort of fit together nicely to even make domestication a possibility, right? And the argument here is basically that if you don't have very many animals to work with in the first place, you have a much smaller chance of being able to domesticate any. And you look at what were the domesticated animals of North America prior to the arrival of Europeans? Anybody know? Yeah. Turkeys. Full stop. End of story. Dogs, well, yeah, dogs maybe as well, but dogs aren't really a food source, so they don't quite fit the same category, right? Whereas you look at the suite of animals that were available, that were domesticated in Asia and Africa, and it's a long list, right? Pretty much all the animals that we think of as domesticated animals come from that part of the world. And the argument here is simply that had this overkill thing not happened, which is not anybody's fault, right? It's the fact that the animals there were not evolutionarily adapted to coexisting with humans. They hadn't co-evolved with humans. They didn't know how to persist in the face of humans. Humans, by the time they arrived, were a different kind of being from what they had been 100,000 years ago, right? They were suddenly equipped with tools that they hadn't had before, first and foremost. You look back, 500,000 years ago, they now had fire. They had bigger brains. I mean, there were a lot of ways in which humans were different from what any of the ancestors could possibly have experienced. Ancestors of these animals could possibly have experienced. And so it's you might call it dumb luck, right? Or it's a consequence of divergent evolution with this arrival of humans superimposed on it. And the long-term consequence of that is a depleted diversity of large animals that can be domesticated. Okay? Yeah, still doesn't make sense?
Well, I think it does. So is it happened because since then weren't these animals hunted or you had to domesticate them to start farming?
No, there's, how to put this? I mean, you can actually if you look closely at the evolution of wheat and the domestication of wheat, you can see ways in which Southwest Asia was sort of had sort of better conditions in which to attempt to domesticate a grass species than were found elsewhere, right? It had a huge range, it had a huge diversity of plants that we now can see are related to wheat, and therefore you had more to work with, right? Similarly with animals, that's the argument. It's simply that humans managed to domesticate a small fraction of the available range of animal species and plant species, and that range of available plant and animal species at least, was greater in places where humans and those animals had co-evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. And the reason for that is that in places where they hadn't, the arrival of humans precipitated the disappearance of 4/5 of the native faunal diversity. Okay, what goes in bibliography? We've got about 10 minutes. I want to get this going in your mind. I want to get you thinking about the bibliography assignment. First of all, what goes in a bibliography? This depends on the context of publication, peer review, and audience. In other words, how many of the claims you make in your paper you need to substantiate with a reference to a source depends on who you're writing for and what you're writing. If you're writing a newspaper article, you probably don't need a lot of footnotes, right? If you're writing an academic article, you do need footnotes or references. Depending on the audience for that academic article, you might need lots of them or fewer of them, right? And it all depends on, how critical is it to substantiate the points you're making by reference to other authorities, right? Authoritative works of research. Typically, a bibliography is going to include the names of the authors, editors, and translators of the work, the date and place of publication, the title of the book, chapter, article, map, or what have you, the publisher or the journal name, and the page numbers. Sometimes you don't need the page numbers, but let's say that you do for our purposes. The idea is what? Pretty simple idea. You got to give them enough information that they can find it too. Whatever it is that you found, they should be able to go and look at. It's really not more complicated than that. It's sort of like imagine that the person you're talking to or writing for is just a really persistent 5-year-old and is always saying, why? How do you know that? Right? You say such and such happened in 1537. Really? How? How do you know that? And you need to be able to say, well, if you don't believe me, go here. And you need to give them enough information that they'll get there. And you can assume for that purpose that it's not a 5-year-old and that they know how to find what you found. What does it look like? There are lots of possible formats depending on your discipline, the venue, conventions of different contexts, right? Your GSIs will recommend a format for your bibliography to you. It's important to be consistent and complete. It's more important to be consistent and complete than it is to follow any particular one format, okay? And again, your GSIs can give you examples of formats to follow. And this has to do with is it you put the initials of the author before the last name or after the last name? Do you put the date after the author or at the end? It's nonsense little details. But be consistent, be complete. Why are they important? For credibility, authority, and transparency. That's it. To contribute to the larger effort of building knowledge. If you want your reader to be able to participate fully in this collective process called science or the pursuit of knowledge, then you need to let them know where to go, because if it helps you learn something, maybe it'll help them learn something too. And for ethical integrity, to acknowledge the contributions of others fairly and accurately. It's really hard to come up with an idea that no one else has ever had, right? Chances are good that virtually all your ideas will be ideas that somebody else has had. And that's not to say that you necessarily got them from those other people. Maybe you came up with the idea without relying on them. And that's great. But if you did rely on someone else, you owe it to them to acknowledge it and to attribute that idea to them, because that's where you got it. And the more research you do, the more likely you are to discover that your own ideas, in fact, have been thought by somebody else. And it increases your own authority and credibility if you know that and can acknowledge it. if you can actually point to people who have had these ideas before, because what does that prove? That proves you've done your homework, right? It proves you know what other people have thought. What goes in an annotation? We're going to ask you not just to provide the source, name, and location, journal, that kind of thing for the items in your bibliography, but to write a short annotation for each one that you choose to use. And remember, you will probably look at a whole bunch of different sources, right? You may do searches and come up with a list of 50. You don't have to put all 50 in your bibliography. What we're asking you to do is work through those sources. Some of them you may just skim, you may just read the abstract, you may read the title and know that it's not what you need. But find the ones that are relevant and choose them to include in your bibliography and write an annotation. An annotation is information about the source in relation to specific research purposes. There's no need to write down, what annotation means to make notes about, right? You don't need to make notes about everything in every source. You only need to note the things that matter to you for purposes at hand. So it's essentially taking notes as you read. And you're going to take notes about the things that are going to help you write your paper. This might include what the source says, what the information is, the quality or limitations of that information. You might write, it's based on a study that only looked at North America, but the pattern, the text might be relevant in other places, so it's important. What makes a source uniquely valuable? Is it original? Is it the original or oldest source of its kind? Is this the first person? Is this the Paul Martin for Pleistocene overkill? Or is it somebody else who just sort of repeated it later, right? Data, maps, figures, tables, illustrations, examples, or quotations that are particularly useful. What we're trying to get you to do is do the research, take the notes, such that by the time you're done with your annotated bibliography, you will have all the material you need sitting right in front of you, already noted, annotated, to write your paper. And the idea is that if you turn that in at the end of March, it'll be a cakewalk to write your paper. It'll already basically be sitting in front of you. We're going to ask you to put a minimum of 8 sources in your annotated bibliography, not including websites. That's not to say you can't find the source on the web. But if you find it on the web, we're asking you to find sources that were actually published independently of having simply been put on a website. You see what I'm saying? So Wikipedia does not count. You might go to Wikipedia, ask it, read what it has to say about a subject, and it might include a bunch of footnotes that refer to articles that are published. And those articles might end up being in your bibliography, and they will count as your 8, towards your 8, right? And you can have more, you can have 20, but at least 8 of them have to be of this kind. It should include the most important of the sources you found and examined, not all the sources you found and examined. It should include all the sources you need to write your paper, and the annotations only need to be about 1 paragraph long. So the actual finished product is not likely to be a huge document. It might reflect or represent a fairly significant amount of work working through a longer list of sources that don't end up in your bibliography. But the actual document itself is probably only going to be, 3 pages long, something like that. All right, I think that's it. On Tuesday, you'll watch a movie, and I'll see you a week from today.